Speaking to Newzroom Afrika, UCT constitutional expert Richard Calland warned that the media must be guarded against making more out of what the Nkandla spectacle actually is about. Take a listen.
First of all, let me say I think it's wrong to suggest that the political stakes have never been higher. I think there have been many occasions in the past in this country's difficult and tortuous history where the political stakes have been much, much higher. We must be very careful not to exaggerate what is going on here. Mr. Zuma has a small number of clearly very ardent supporters, but they are located in one particular place. The idea that this country is on the verge of some kind of widespread instability as a result of this matter is, I think, far-fetched and very far removed from the facts. So we must be very careful how we handle this.
So on the back of that, we ask the question, is the media possibly being complicit in manufacturing a crisis around the former president? Let's make sense of this. Bring in Director of Media Monitoring Africa, William Bird, who joins us now via our video link. William, great to chat to you. Thanks for making time. Largely, there are two schools of thought here. The one, don't play into the former president's strategy. He enjoys the media attention and it fuels whatever he's got going on. The other school of thought is you can't ignore this. It's of public interest because it's not every day that a former president is found to be in contempt of court and is possibly sent to jail. What does the media do?
Hi, good morning. So, I mean, I think that's very well articulated. You know, that is basically the horns of the ethical dilemma that you find, that the media finds itself on. How do you give appropriate coverage to what is very clearly an important issue for South Africa, but at the same time ensure that you don't fall into the agenda of any particular party that has a very direct interest in that. So in this instance, you know, the former president and their idea. So I think that the first thing, you know, it starts in small ways. So one of the first things that we saw was this idea that the former president would address the nation. Now that's not something that, you know, is happening. It's not a State of the Nation address, which we have at the opening of Parliament. It's not one of the family meetings that we have, and even that term is potentially problematic. This is an attempt to get an idea that this person is there to address the nation, when in fact it wasn't. What he was doing was hosting a press conference. And our media should have been quick on that to say, you know, okay, they're going to be hosting a press conference to respond to these kinds of issues. These things always then get a lot more difficult and challenging for the media when they're in the thick of it. They're there with the emotions of people. Emotions are running high. They're being harassed. They're being threatened, we saw, which is completely unacceptable. And so that then encourages the media to then make potentially this into something that's bigger, especially when you saw the media contingent that was there. You know, you had all the international media there, so you can well understand why there's a big issue, especially because this isn't something that is an everyday occurrence. That said, I think what the media can and must be more strongly ardent pushing for is the idea of holding the president to account and making sure that they test and challenge the issues that are put out there. So if you watch the press conference, there were some really excellent questions put forward by our media to the former president. What isn't clear, though, is that in the subsequent press coverage, you don't necessarily get that sense that's how it is, because we tend to just see some of the voice snippets that we had from the former president, which of course is him articulating his particular perspective on things.
Interesting the take you have on how the media responded to the former president at Nkandla. I saw some critique in the commentary that those moments where there was laughter, for instance, between the former president and some of our colleagues, downplay what's actually at stake here. And perhaps they have a point. It's difficult to come back from that, isn't it? To be critical of the former president after, I guess, giggling with him, dare I say, sometimes even uncomfortably.
Yeah, you know, look, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a general sense of humanity and occurring between someone being interviewed and journalists. You know, that's okay. But what is important is that the media then go and test the allegations and assertions that are being made there. And so many of those, you know, our media in their reporting need to actually clearly put out there. You know, it's not that, you know, he's, for example, he keeps saying that, you know, his rights have been trampled upon and all of this. Like, where's the evidence for that? Because if you read the Constitutional Court judgment, if you read the High Court judgments, if you read all of the papers in those things, there's no evidence, none whatsoever, that any of that has any truth to it. And that's important that people do that to put that in perspective. So we did see yesterday another example, journalists asking, how do you possibly square this kind of argument that you've been making that you can't possibly go to jail because of your health, and yet here you are, not wearing a mask, not asking your supporters to wear masks, breaking these regulations. Like, how do you square this argument of being with the rule of law and yet clearly violating it and ignoring it on the other hand? And that's the kind of dilemmas that the media need to put up, so that we don't just fall into whatever kind of agenda their side is wanting to put forward. And and that's just about being good critical journalists. It's about saying, well, what is it that they're pushing? Is there some truth to that? Now, I think the closest comparison we have to this is former President Trump, right? Where you knew that whenever he gave a press conference, people wanted to cover it. And of course they should, because, he was the president at that point. But again, you also knew that what he was going to be saying was a lot of nonsense. And so what media worked out to do was that actually many of them, they started to run, live fact checks as he spoke, so that whatever he said could be fact checked as it was spoken, so that people got a bit more perspective to say, well, he might be saying X, Y, and Z, but actually it's not X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And I think there's a similar need here so that you can put the issues that they are deliberately, escalating, putting more emotive issues into, and you can put that into context and say, well, these and these and these are the issues. It's not, the Constitutional Court judgment was very clear in the way that this is why they've decided to give this particular sentence. They can, media should be quoting sections from that and helping people understand that it wasn't just an arbitrary thumbsuck that Justice Kampepe came up with, but it was 7 justices. In fact, all 9 justices agreed it was contempt of court, and then some disagreed with the particular sentence. So those are the things that media need to then tease out so that they can put it in perspective.
Yeah. Not to deflect, but you and I both know that for the media to do more, they must be given more. Most newsrooms are working in a context of dire constraints. How much of that issue do you think is hampering our ability to really meet this occasion where we need to, which is have increased rigor and be, as you rightly pointed out, a bit more critical as the facts come in?
So look, you're right. They can't do that. Of course, the ideal would be that they do that for every story. And the reality is most of our newsrooms just don't, all of them, don't have anywhere near the kind of resources to do that, which is why they need to pick the stories where they can and must do that. And I would argue that this is one of those, given its importance and given what's at stake, and given how it's being framed by certain entities and people. That's the kind of story where you do that. And again, it's like, we're in the middle of this massive spike. The COVID issue is there. We need to make sure that we ask the questions that need to be asked. And it's not just saying, well, Mr. Zuma, why are you allowing your supporters here? It should be, well, why have the police not acted? Why have the police not arrested these people, when we know that in any other circumstance, if any of us are out after curfew, we will be arrested, let alone, going and standing there and having an illegal gathering. So why haven't the police acted? So it's then getting responses from government in terms of that COVID response. So yes, there is definitely a resource issue, but my suggestion there would be that our media need to pick the stories that they can devote what precious few resources they have to do that. And I think that they also then need to work with other partners. There are things like Africa Check, where you could go and say, okay, let's run whatever the president is saying with this. And to a large degree, our media have done that. That's why they're interviewing a lot of legal experts to get that legal input and expertise that they don't otherwise have. But then the suggestion might be, well, okay, let's make sure that whenever we cover this, we always before we address it, the legal input of some legal expert. Not that you have to interview that person, but that you're getting their take on what is being said and what is being alleged, so that when you run that story, you're already running it with a bit more of an informed perspective.
Right. Crucially important that we introspect in a context where there's just so much uncertainty. William Bird, thanks very much indeed for helping us do that. He is the director at Media Monitoring Africa. William, once again, thanks very much indeed.